The Covenant of Resistance, Part 1. Greetings and salutations to all our viewers. Welcome to Freestyle Interfaith. Today we gather at the intersection of history and holiness to examine the spirit of Juneteenth, not as a static date, but as a living covenant of liberation. The theology of the imperial firmament. To understand the depth of our current mandate, we must dismantle the imperial firmament, that heavy, unyielding architecture of power that seeks to frame human existence as a series of extractive contracts. For too long, we have accepted the narrative that our labor, our bodies, and our very spirits are property to be leased by higher powers. But the Anunnaki and the Elohim of the past serve as warnings, not blueprints. We reject the extractive model. The Harriet Tubman. We look to the spirit of Harriet Tubman, the strategist of the underground. Tubman was not merely a conductor, she was a master of divine logistical warfare. She understood that freedom of movement is a primordial God-given right that no legislative body can legitimately revoke. Her life proves that when faith is aligned with action, the chains of the firmament begin to rust and break. Imagine the Maryland woods deep in the winter of 1851. The silence of the forest is not empty, it is await. Tubman moved through this silence with a precision that defies modern logic. She did not just navigate the geography of swamps and riverbeds, she mapped the spiritual geometry of her environment. She taught her charges that the moss on a tree or the flight pattern of a nighthawk were not accidents, but directives from the Creator. While the imperial firmament, the plantation economy, relied on the noise of fear, whips, and shouting, Tubman operated in the frequency of absolute stillness. She understood that in the kingdom of the free, silence is the most sophisticated communication tool. She was the ghost that haunted the machinery of slavery, proving that a single human being, aligned with a divine mandate, can effectively dismantle the perceived invincibility of a brutal system. This is the template we must adopt today, a quiet, unshakable focus on our North Star, regardless of how deep the woods become. But let us be clear, the woods of 1851 were not merely a place of concealment, they were a laboratory of liberation. Harriet Tubman didn't just move people, she mastered the terrain, the timing, and the quiet logistics of hope. She understood that a system, whether it's a 19th century plantation or a modern-day extractive algorithm, relies on noise, fear, and the fracturing of human connection. To resist, one must master the frequency of stillness. When we speak of the covenant today, we are not looking to return to those woods. We are looking to adopt the same precision of spirit. We are looking for the modern-day conductors in our digital infrastructure. How do we practice freedom of movement when the chains have become invisible lines of code? Part 1. The Covenant of Resistance Expanded. The John Brown Witness. We invoke the memory of John Brown. He stands as the ultimate radical refutation of the territorial leasehold model. By refusing to accept the legitimacy of a system built on stolen life, Brown demonstrated that true freedom requires not just prayer, but the courage to physically dismantle the structures of oppression. His witness remains a challenge to every conscience. Are you comfortable in the lease, or are you ready for the liberation? Consider the silence of the Maryland midnight. When Tubman moved, she was not just traversing geography, she was navigating a spiritual geometry that the slave catchers could not perceive. She read the stars not as distant lights, but as the map of the Creator's intent. We must ask ourselves, what are the stars in our own lives? What is the North Star we follow when the path is obscured by the fog of modern convenience? And then look to Brown. When he stood at Harper's Ferry, he was not just fighting for a territory, he was declaring that the leasehold of the human spirit was void. He saw that the sin of slavery was a disease infecting the entire body of the nation, and he chose to be the surgeon's blade, knowing full well the cost to his own life. This is the radical nature of faith. It is the willingness to be the catalyst for a fire that you may not live to see burn out. To understand the radicalism of John Brown, we must look past the caricatures. He was a man who walked into the furnace of American history not out of malice, but out of a profound, devastating sense of clarity. Brown understood that a society built on the leasehold, where human beings are treated as property, is a society that has forfeited its own moral right to exist. When he stood at Harper's Ferry, he was not merely launching an insurrection, he was performing an act of spiritual exorcism. He knew that the ghost of slavery would not be cast out by polite debate or compromise. He became the blade, knowing that the cost was his own breath. We must ask, are we willing to be the surgeons of our own time? Are we willing to cut away the rot of systemic inequality, even when the rest of the world calls it necessary, inevitable, or the way things are? The covenant of resistance is not a comfortable path. It requires us to identify the imperial firmament in our own lives, those structures of convenience that we cling to at the expense of our neighbor's freedom, and begin the work of systematic dismantling. This is not about anger, it is about the cold, crystalline realization that justice is not granted, it is enacted. We must engage with the reality of John Brown. The world calls him a fanatic because his life challenges the gradualist narrative, the idea that justice can be negotiated over time. Brown saw that the leasehold on human life was not a contract to be amended, but an abomination to be incinerated. He understood the ethics of the surgical strike. When he entered the armory at Harper's Ferry, he was not trying to win a legislative debate. He was performing an act of physical truth-telling. He acted on the principle that the cost of inaction is higher than the cost of resistance. For us in 2026, the lesson is clear. True liberation requires the courage to stop asking for permission. It requires the Brown Protocol, the willingness to place one's own body and future in the path of the systemic rot to ensure that a new structure can be built on firm, honest ground. Consider the broader implications of the covenant. We often mistake history for a closed book, but for those who understand the imperial firmament, history is a living field of energy. When we honor the legacy of those who broke the chains, we are not just looking back, we are calibrating our own compasses for the present. Think of the psychological transition from property to sovereign human. This is the most difficult migration anyone can make. It requires unlearning every lie the system has whispered into your ear about your worth, your capabilities, and your right to exist. This transition is not a moment, it is a life's work. When you choose to resist, you are essentially deciding that the lease you were born into is void. You are reclaiming the land of your own spirit. This is what John Brown understood so violently and what Harriet Tubman understood so quietly. They knew that once you internalize your own freedom, the physical chains become nothing more than temporary obstacles. We are currently in the process of reclaiming that internal sovereignty. We are moving from the position of the least subject to the architect of our own destiny. To enter into this covenant is to make a choice. It is a decision to prioritize the divine mandate over the convenience of the status quo. It requires what I call radical digital literacy, understanding how our attention is captured, how our histories are curated, and how we can reclaim the narrative. If the imperial firmament thrives on our disconnection, our resistance must be built on the intentionality of our community. We are not just creating content, we are mapping the territory of a new, shared future. As we lead up to Juneteenth, let this be our focus. Not just looking back at the chains broken in the past, but recognizing the chains that we must consciously dismantle today. This is the first movement. Next time, we will explore the specific logistical tools, the ways we organize, the ways we communicate that allow us to sustain this covenant. Stay focused on the North Star. We are just beginning. We conclude this first movement. Carry these reflections with you. The firmament is cracking, and the foundation of our collective freedom is being laid anew. Peace to the seekers. Musical cue, cello fades into silence.